anybody in our program, and this is not our standard that we're trying to set.
Nobody likes losing, but lose they did. Miami had a blowout win against Temple on Saturday at the Link.
But the Owls have a chance to redeem themselves this Thursday night in their first conference game of the season in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I'm Hayden Bandel, live from Edward Golson Hall. Later in the show, I'll tell you about a partnership forming between Temple and a football recruiting program that helps bring future Owls from overseas to North Broad.
And I'm Sam Covone, live at the studio set. I will have the latest on all of the teams around the American, as well as looking ahead to matchups that are still to come this season. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now. Hello and welcome back to Inside the Nest. I'm Meg Doyle and he's Jake Gabel. We have a lot to cover today, starting with multiple hurricanes. One hurricane traveled up the coast on Saturday.
And we've got another hurricane, a golden hurricane, waiting for the Owls in Tulsa. But first, let's start with the 20th ranked hurricane, the one from South Florida. While it wasn't quite hurricane weather, it was darn close. Miami came to play the Owls in the storm. First drive for Miami, Henry Parrish Jr. rushes up the middle for 17 yards. Same drive, different play. Quarterback Tyler Van Dyke finds an open Xavier Restrepo in the end zone for the touchdown. Miami held the ball for nearly 7 minutes on its first drive. Starting the second quarter, Temple in the red zone, E.J. Warner and Jordan Smith miscommunication leads to an interception. Following the turnover, Van Dyke entered the game with 4 rushing yards in 3 games. Well, he fakes out the whole stadium as he gets 37 right there. Van Dyke then throws up the 50-50 ball to Colby Young, who simply outjumps Tywan Francis for the score. Then, here comes the third star receiver for Miami, Jacoby George, picking up the 39-yard gain. Miami will have to settle for a field goal to make it a 17-0 game, scoring on their first 3 drives. 3 minutes remaining in the half. Miami's Thomas Gore forces an E.J. Warner fumble. This is going to lead to yet another touchdown for the U. Here you have Henry Parrish Jr. picking up the rushing score this time as he gets into the end zone. Temple will get the ball back with just a minute to go, and Warner is going to drop back and find Ahmad Anderson Jr. over the middle. This will set the Owls up with a chance to score entering the half. Warner, hit as he throws, finds tight end Reese Clark Jr. for his first career reception touchdown. And Temple is on the board with just 2 seconds remaining in the second quarter.
Now into the second half, and the Owls are down by 17. Miami came out of the locker room hungry for more. Rashad Smith runs 28 yards into scoring territory. This sets up Henry Parrish for 3 yards into the end zone to put 7 more points on the board. Temple attempts to respond, but the pressure is on Warner as he throws short and right into Miami's hands, his second interception of the day. The Hurricanes find the end zone once again, finishing with 5 touchdowns and leaving the Link with a 41-7 win over Temple. The stats are in, and they are not pretty. Warner completed 22 out of his 39 passes for 240 yards and 2 interceptions. Edward Sadie had 12 rushing yards for the game. Ahmad Anderson did find a rhythm in this big loss, setting new career highs of 117 receiving yards on 10 receptions. On the flip side, Miami had a stellar game with quarterback Tyler Van Dyke completing 17 out of 250 passes with 220 yards and 3 touchdowns. Henry Parrish Jr. had a career-high 139 rushing yards for Miami. Meanwhile, receiver George Jacoby had 5 catches for a team-high 90 yards.
After a tough game like that, the players are going to have to answer some tough questions.
That's right. Let's take a listen to what E.J. Warner and Tywan Francis had to say post-game.
Nothing really in particular I can say until I watch the film. Just we executed better in the first half and just didn't do it as well in the second. So we got to make sure we can respond next week and make sure that doesn't happen. Be a both half team that can come out and finish games. I mean, yeah, of course you want the run game. It helps take some pressure off and helps bring some more guys into the box so that you can throw a little bit easier. But there's still no excuse at the end of the day for my play and our pass game. No matter how many guys are out there, I gotta find ways to make plays and help this team move the ball down the field. Yeah, and just drop back. They got some pressure on me. They kind of grabbed me a couple guys, so I just kept my eyes downfield, trusted that Reese is going to be there, and put the ball in a spot so you could go get in. Made a good play, took a hit, and made a good touchdown catch.
Each week, you got to move on. Just speeding up the process. Got to go home, watch the tape, like right now, and make the corrections as soon as possible because we have a short week. We play Thursday, and we can't go out there on a short week making the same mistakes we made this week. So there's no excuse. We got to get it done. Coach preaches fly to the ball. It doesn't matter what the scoreboard is or how many seconds on the clock. We still got to play, and we got to play to the best of our ability with the time on the clock. That's also a piece of my mentality. Just don't quit. Keep going. You got to keep chopping at the wood.
I'm going to jump right into this game discussion. That was Tywan Francis. You heard him saying, just don't quit. After a big loss like that, when you're in that game, I can't imagine how defeating it can be. But that's the best mentality you can have. Temple did not have a great performance by any means. I mean, E.J. Warner had 3 sacks and 2 interceptions, and Miami ended up scoring both times that ball was intercepted. The offense as a whole just did not play in unison. We needed more coverage for E.J. Warner to be able to complete passes. There was a lack of a run game, and it just was a rough game.
Yeah, and sticking on the EJ point, you heard in the postgame that he said weather wasn't an impact, but I really think it was an impact. I know you can't say that it was, but I think it had a lot of effect on some of his throws there. It wasn't good conditions. It was raining all game, very windy during the entire game. And then offensively, though, it just seemed like players were out of sync. There was times where people were running the route the wrong way, or EJ was throwing the ball behind players on very catchable balls. And I think that we can see a much better EJ Warner throughout the rest of the season.
I completely agree with you. And it's tough because you can't have a passing game if there's no run game. The plays become too predictable. In Miami, they're just sending guys out for coverage. And every time we saw EJ had lots of pressure on him at all times, which made his passes inaccurate. I mean, he completed only a little over half of his passes, 22 for 39. And the whole game, Temple only had 11 rushing yards compared to Miami's 323. I mean, those stats are in 2 different atmospheres. You can't even compare that game. They just were playing at different levels.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you need a running game there if you're going to win. I mean, 11 yards is just completely unacceptable. And then there are some missing key players as well. Dante Wright, Jalen McMurray, Javonte Rigby, all of them were gone for this game. All of them plays huge roles in their positions respectfully, and they really could have used them in this game, as the final score suggests. But the lone bright spot was Ahmad Anderson Jr. He played a really good game, filling in for Dante Wright as that wide receiver 1. He had a career high in both receptions and receiving yards, and he really showed that he could be a big-time playmaker for Temple the rest of the season.
He was definitely a star for this game. Now, I want to switch over and talk about Miami defense a little bit. They needed to step it up this game. Miami scored on all but 3 drives. I mean, offense did not perform well, which meant that Temple defense was on the field for most of it. But, however, Miami still needed to, get on the ball.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. But as usual, we had a couple of crews at the game on Saturday, and they were braving that nasty weather. With that, we're going to welcome on in Hayden Bandel from Inside the Nest. He is live at Edberg Olson Hall currently. Hey, Hayden.
Hey, Jake. When you hear the name Victor Stoffel, there are a lot of different characteristics that come to mind. Captain, leader, single digit. On the field, he does wear the number 78 due to NCAA restrictions. Off the field, he loves to cook, among other hobbies. But he has come a long way from his homeland in Sweden to his new home in Philadelphia. At age 14, Temple O-lineman Victor Stoffel wanted to begin playing an aggressive sport.
Tried boxing, didn't like it.
Stoffel then attended a sports convention in Sweden where he discovered football.
You get to put on pads, and you get to hit like a tackle dummy, and you get to throw the ball too. I couldn't really throw the ball, but I was good at tackling a dummy. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna try this.
Stoffel began his career as a linebacker, but then became too big for the position and switched to the defensive line, until he came to Temple, where he switched sides of the ball.
With Victor's standpoint, I told him, this kid, I think he's very talented playing defensive line, but I think you should try him at O-line.
Brandon Collier has recruited football players from more than 50 different countries.
I've seen Victor playing on a national team. He made a 10-foot broad jump coming out of high school. So I just seen that explosiveness. I knew that he had a shot to go Division I.
Now in his 5th season of college football, Stoffel is the 5th oldest non-kicker in the FBS at age 25 and is the leader of Temple's offensive line.
Victor is a guy that has really stepped into the roles, just like we try and cycle through when you're developing leadership skills.
One of the first guys in, last one to leave when we're doing anything. So you can kind of see it from an early age. So I'm not surprised that he made the single digit and is one of the leaders of the team.
Stoffel said whenever his playing days are done, he wants to expand the sport in Europe.
I definitely want to help kind of grow the sport in Europe, I think. That's really what I want to do. I want to take the knowledge I've learned from my time here in the U.S. and kind of apply that to football in Europe.
Stoffel was not the first and will not be the last Temple Owl found through PPI recruits. Brandon Collier also found Isaac Moore to bring him to Temple, who was a single-digit offensive lineman last season. And next year, Temple will bring in Daniel Everett, a 6'5", 235-pound tight end from Germany, who Collier told me might be one of the better talents the Owls have ever brought from PPI recruits. That's all I have now from Edinburgh Golson Hall. Meg and Jake, back to you.
Thanks, Hayden. A good story, but a rough loss on Saturday. Let's take a look at the film to see where Temple went wrong.
It's time for our snapshot. We'll each take a closer look and do a play from last week. Jake, get us started.
So my play is going to be an E.J. Warner pass. He's going to roll out to the right. No one near him. He's going to throw. Ahmad Anderson's wide open, but it doesn't connect. He overthrows him. Let's see what happened on that play. So he rolls out, pause it right here, and you'll see that he is off his 2 feet. He's in the air jumping on that throw. He needs to have his feet planted on the ground in order to make an accurate 40-yard pass. You can play it here, and you'll see that the ball just isn't a complete spiral. As it goes through, it's just not going to connect with Ahmad Anderson as it's wobbling a little bit on the back end.
For my play, I'm going with one of EJ's 2 intercepted passes for the game. You see him here. He makes a throw, but it goes right into Miami's hands. We're going to watch that back one more time, and I want you to watch. You see the Miami defense pressuring him. He throws it. Go ahead and stop it right here. There's a Temple player feet away, not even close, not even in the same range. Go ahead and play it. Miami ended up coming back and scoring on this drive, and it was just a rough interception for EJ.
Definitely, but we're up on our first break. When we come back, we'll listen and react to head coach Stan Drayton's weekly press conference. It's a short week.
Not much time to rebound for Miami before heading to Tulsa. Don't go anywhere. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. It was pretty easy to see right from the start the difference in the game between the Owls and the Hurricanes on Saturday.
That's where Stan Drayton started off in his weekly news conference on Monday, talking about the rough loss, but he then moves quickly forward into the Owls conference opener.
You know, here's the deal. They fought, right? And they gave really good effort. I think that we played against a very good defensive line. They were strong, they were big, and they were fast. You know, they were very twitchy. And, you know, for the most part, you know, we gave up the 3 sacks. We didn't run the football, so it's hard to say that we did a good job, okay? But within plays, I didn't think that there was quit in them, you know? So there was a little matchup issue there that we had to deal with. And, you know, I can give that credit to Miami. You know, they're recruiting at a totally different level. They have a caliber of football player that I would love to have, you know, but we're just not quite there yet. And, we're in the building phase of this program in year 2, and I hope that in the near future we'll be able to be competitive against teams like that. Yeah, we're getting ready for conference play, so we have to flush that game and get ourselves ready to win. Get ourselves in position to try to win a conference championship, an American Conference Championship, and that's been our goal from day one, and it will be, my whole entire time here. We'll chase that goal, and in order to do that, you have to overcome adversity, right? You have to, be able to take a win, take a loss, and process it and move on to the next game. It's one game at a time, one day at a time mentality that we have to embrace.
For those guys?
Well, it's the same challenge that Tulsa has. They're coming on a short week as well, so, the challenge is to make sure that we don't make it an excuse, not to make it an issue. And our players have done a great job of just focusing in on the things that we need to prepare and when we see Tulsa, but also to kind of fix some of the things that we had to repair from the Miami game. So yeah, it's just it's the same for same issue that Tulsa is facing, and neither team could use that as an excuse.
That was part 1 of Stan Drayton's presser. I'm going to jump right into it with my thoughts. I wanted to start and talk about how Stan addressed that Miami is just at a very different recruiting level than Temple. I mean, these are 2 teams who are not even in the same ballpark of recruiting. That goes to show that he gave the team credit still. Temple had a rough loss, but Stan still made sure to point out the good things in this game. Now, not only that, but looking ahead to this Thursday night game, historically, the Owls are 6-4 in the last 10 Thursday nights game. But they haven't won a Thursday night game since 2019 against South Florida. So I think that's also going to have a little bit of an impact on their play.
Yeah, the Owls are definitely due for that Thursday night win. And I also want to talk about how Drayton talked about Miami, because it was interesting to see how candid he was about the difference between Miami and Temple. I know that they are different programs and they're differently ranked, but he was honest about them being not there this year, but he hopes by next year that they will be. And he's right, because Miami has about 6 or 7 guys that are going to be playing on NFL Sundays very soon, and 2 of them are potential first-round picks this year in the NFL draft. So Miami is definitely in another league. And talking about having to flush it, that's totally true. This team really needs to bounce back. We are going to learn a lot about this team depending on how they bounce back against Tulsa after that really rough Miami loss.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see. Now let's hear what else Coach Drayton had to say about where the Owls need to improve.
Yeah, they've played quite a few quarterbacks this year. I don't know what's going on there. I know number 7, the last couple of games has been their starter, and he's a dual threat, a real dual threat. He can run, and he's very athletic, shifty, can change direction. They do a lot of quarterback runs with him. So that left side of that offensive line is as good as any. And they got a right tackle that's 345 pounds at 6'5". They're pretty big, and they're transfers from Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, which I'm very familiar with those 2 programs and their offensive lines. And if there are any indication of the programs that they're coming from, they're going to be good football players. So yeah, we got to challenge us in the trenches again, but our guys got to step up and meet that challenge. Not bad. We still gave us some explosives. I think our safeties need to play better. I think that's where we need to kind of really lock in and focus. And the corners, they're on an island out there, and you got to live with some explosive plays. You can teach those guys to have amnesia when they have an issue out there, because they're playing one of the toughest positions on defense, right? And but our safety play needs to improve. Yeah, he's coming. He's still a freshman in a lot of ways. And we got to teach him how to prepare better. There's no doubt he loves football, right? But he makes a lot of freshman mistakes, and when you play freshmen, you're hoping that they're not going to make too many freshman mistakes, right? You want them to play above their classification in the classroom, but that's going to show up from time to time with X. But he's a tough individual. He's playing on special teams a lot. He adds value that way for this football team, and he's earned the right to give it a shot on offense from time to time. And the more he continues to be intentional about his development, the more we'll see him play.
That was the rest of the press conference from Stan Drayton, so I'll get into it right here. And I was surprised that Stan called out the safeties, both Tywan Francis and Alex Odom. Both of them are single digits. I know Tywan Francis might not be a literal single digit, but he's wore that number 4 all 4 weeks so far. They've done a good job except for that Miami game. So I don't know if that's more on the safeties or more on that rush defense that gave up over 300 yards. And then he really talked up the Tulsa offensive line, and I think that's going to be a big mismatch against the Temple D-line that I just mentioned.
Yes, and going off of what you just said, Cardell Williams, he is the second-string quarterback for Tulsa, and so far he's been playing consistently in their games. Stan mentioned that he can run, and running the ball is something that we have not consistently seen from E.J. Warner. So that is something that Temple's going to need to work on if they want to be able to catch up and play like Tulsa can at their level. It's now time for another break. When we come back, we'll be bringing back an old segment to gain more insight on the Tulsa Golden Hurricane.
You won't want to miss this. Inside the Nest will be back in 90 seconds.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Now that we worked through where Temple fell short in the game against Miami, it's time to preview the Owls' first conference matchup.
On a short week, we're going to scout out and roll the tape on the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. Tulsa has had 3 different quarterbacks start games so far this season. Cardell Williams started last week against NIU and is the projected starter. As far as the defense goes, their secondary is certainly lacking. The Golden Hurricane has allowed 10 passing touchdowns so far, as well as 302 passing yards a game. They're currently bottom 10 in the entire nation for passing yards allowed. Last game, however, the team gave up its fewest passing yards so far this season. And that game in this win against Northern Illinois, 22-14. Quarterback Cardell Williams played all 4 quarters for the first time, completing just 8 passes and throwing 2 interceptions. Anthony Watkins did the damage on the ground, though, rushing for 91 yards and a touchdown. For NIU, quarterback Ethan Hampton also struggled, throwing for 2 interceptions as well. Owls fan, you may recognize this name, Justin Lynch. That's right, that Justin Lynch. He played quarterback in 11 games for the Owls in 2021. He has transitioned to running back at his new school.
Now that we're a little more familiar with Tulsa's performance from its Week 4 matchup, let's get into how we think Tulsa matches up against Temple.
So the game is going to be on ESPN on national television, and that's 2 straight weeks of national TV games for Temple. And these teams have had very similar starts so far. They've both had 2 big blowout losses to Power 5 schools. That being said, both of the losses that Tulsa faced were against ranked teams. And then Temple, they've had 2 big blowout losses. And then they've also had some wins against lesser opponents. So they come in very, very similar in this game. And then the quarterback play. It's been inconsistent and abysmal. One area that they definitely have to improve in. And then their special teams. That's the one thing of this Tulsa team that is really good. They rank first in ESPN's special teams efficiency rankings. The special team stat, it factors in play-to-play situations, putting importance on plays close in score and factoring in how strong the opposing unit is, as well as if the play leads to a score. Tulsa kicker Chase Meyer has yet to miss a field goal or extra point, and they are first in conference in kickoff return average.
I mean, that's pretty impressive from Tulsa's special teams. One other thing, Temple has not won at Tulsa since 2017, which was 6 years ago. Now, not only that, but Tulsa is pretty balanced offensively. 181.5 passing yards and 169.5 rushing yards. Temple's passing game is a little bit different. They lead with their passing 258 yards per game and only 107.5 rushing yards. Temple hasn't been able to find that balance yet, and I think that they're going to need to step it up for this game.
Yeah, the passing defense is definitely very weak. They allowed Oklahoma and Washington to throw for over 450 yards each. But now it's time to get into our tools to success for the blueprint for success. Tool 1, sling it. E.J. Warner has a great matchup against the Tulsa defense, one of the worst passing defenses in the entire country, giving up more than 300 yards through the air per game. It's a great opportunity for E.J. Warner to have a bounce-back game. Now, tool 2, make Tulsa's quarterbacks beat you. The quarterback play from the Golden Hurricane hasn't been the best. It's been pretty inconsistent so far, starting 3 different quarterbacks. Make these quarterbacks have to beat you in this game and don't let their running backs take over.
Now, for tool number 3, the offensive line needs better pass protection. Warner completed 22 out of his 39 pass attempts. He threw 2 passes that got intercepted, along with being sacked 3 times. In the press conference, Warner took a lot of the blame for the offense's poor performance, but it wasn't just on him. Without pass protection, EJ has no time in the pocket to make accurate throws. For our final tool for today, respect the run. Tulsa had 179 rushing yards in its most recent game, while Temple only had 11. Temple has not been able to consistently run the ball since the start of the season, which leads to a more inefficient offense as a whole and limits the passing game. We've watched the film, heard from Stan Drayton on his thoughts for the Tulsa matchup, but now we're going to hear from someone on the Tulsa side.
Meg and I had the chance to talk to Barry Lewis, a sports writer for the Tulsa World. He's been covering all things Tulsa sports since 1993. Here's our conversation that starts with talk about the team's head coach.
On to this year, I know this is the first year of Kevin Wilson's tenure as head coach. Could you introduce him to us a little bit and what he's brought to the table for your team so far?
People were very familiar with him around here because of his time at the University of Oklahoma, being a coordinator there. So there was that type of comfort factor, and he had head coaching experience for 6 years at Indiana, helped turn around their program there. He took over a program that was really down and out and at least brought them to respectability. And then for the last 6 years, he had been on Ohio State's staff.
Braylon Braxton, he got injured in the first quarter of the first game, and Cardell Williams stepped up and has been quarterback ever since. Will he be starting in the game against Temple as well?
Well, with TU, it's always a mystery who's going to be, whether it was Philip Montgomery in previous years or Kevin Wilson this year. It's they don't want to tip their hand ever, so we won't know for sure until right before kickoff on Thursday. That's the way it was this past Saturday at Northern Illinois when there's in the week before against OU. Because there's actually 3 quarterbacks in the mix, at least 3 quarterbacks in the mix, which adds to the interesting situation.
Last year, Tulsa beat Temple 27-16 in Philadelphia on a Friday night. Now, fast forward a year to this year's matchup, also in a primetime slot. What are the biggest differences from last year's Tulsa teams to this year?
Probably the discipline. There haven't been as many. There just seemed to be more breakdowns last year for Tulsa, not as disciplined penalty-wise. The one thing that Coach Wilson is very concerned about, and which Tulsa really needs to be concerned about, is they're committing way too many turnovers. And that's something that also hurt them last year. So that's got to be a priority for Tulsa moving forward.
Since it only has been 4 games, what would you identify as the biggest strengths on both the offensive side and the defensive side for Tulsa?
Well, it's hard for me to identify. So I know it's going to be hard. It can be hard for the opponent trying to figure out what Tulsa's offense is, because it really doesn't have an identity right now. The running backs, you never know which they play 3 or 4 running backs regularly and rotate them in and out. You don't know which one of them is going to get the bulk of the carries. Again, you don't even know who the quarterback's going to be. And from week to week, you don't even know who the go-to receiver is going to be. Last week, it was Camden Benjamin would have sort of qualified as that. But there's just been no consistency for Tulsa. And then on defense, the definite star of the show there is the free safety, Kendaran Ray, who is this week's American Athletic Conference Defensive Player of the Week. He is one person who's brought it every week, which is no surprise. He's a 6th-year player. was considered coming into the year as going to be one of their leaders. And he's just delivered week after week.
So we wanted to know what your score prediction is for this game on Thursday.
I'm going to call it 30-22 in favor of Tulsa.
Once again, we all picked the same winner, and once again, we were all correct. Perfection across the board. Myself, Meg, and Hayden were all very close to getting the correct final score.
So far, everyone in the crew has an even record, but will that change after this Thursday night game?
Let's hear from our beat reporter, Sam Covone, who is live at the studio set to start us out. Hey, Sam.
This week, I have Temple taking home the win 23-17. I can see this being a very close game, as both of these teams have scored about 20 points per game. If Temple can establish its passing game and the defense can stop the run game of the Golden Hurricane, then I believe that the Owls will be in very good shape and they will be able to walk away with the win. Hayden, this is a Temple team looking for something good after another blowout loss. But it's also a Temple team traveling to Tulsa and playing a night game on a Thursday. Who do you have coming out of Chapman Stadium with the win?
Well, Sam, one thing that is not mentioned too often is Temple struggles on the road. Over the last 4 seasons, they have only one road win that came at Akron, and that wasn't even in the Stan Drayton era. On Saturday, I also didn't like how Temple's safeties played against Miami, and I don't think that's going to help them out on the defensive end, especially with the different number of quarterbacks that Tulsa has, along with their running backs. I'm going to take the Golden Hurricane to win 29-25. So there we have it. That's our first dispute of the season. Meg, are you going to stick with me and go with Tulsa, or are you going to agree with Sam, who picked Temple?
Thanks, Hayden. I have Temple taking the win over the Golden Hurricane 24-21. Temple is coming off a big loss against Miami, which I think adds fuel to the fire and will push them this week. Tulsa also has a weak passing defense, which will work in Temple's favor and allow E.J. Warner and Temple's passing offense to succeed.
This was a really tough decision for me. The strengths and weaknesses of both teams match up very evenly, but I'm going 21-19 Tulsa. The deciding factor for me was that Temple has to travel on a short week for a night game. Also, Tulsa's rushing offense is good, and the Owls could not stop the run last week. While Tulsa's pass defense has gotten torched, it was against 2 Heisman candidates. After watching Miami's offense go no huddle all of last weekend against Temple, we thought it was time for us to as well.
But first, we have another break. Stay tuned. We'll see you on the other side.
Hello and welcome back to Inside the Nest. It's time for us to go no huddle.
You guys know the drill by now. We'll state some questions and rattle off our answers. Take it away, Jake.
All right. Question 1. How does Temple fix their run game?
My answer to this, it's pretty simple. It comes down to the offense's execution. They must complete their assignments to open up holes, and running backs have to quickly find and hit those holes, and then maybe we can get a run game going.
I completely agree there. The running backs had to do a lot of work just to gain so little yards. They were pumping out about 4 or 5 yards sideways just to gain 2 yards forward. The offensive line has to help them out there.
Absolutely. Now for question 2, who has been a standout player so far for Temple?
I'm going with Tywan Francis. He's earned a single digit every single week, and I'm surprised he hasn't gotten a permanent one yet. He leads the team in both tackles and has the only interception so far for the Owls.
He has been a standout player, but mine, I'm going with Dante Wright. Although we didn't see him play against Miami, he has 185 receiving yards for the season, and he is someone who has consistently performed well in every single game. Not only that, but we've also heard Stan talk about him in press conferences that he is such a great leader on and off the field. And when it comes to Temple football, it's not just your performance on the field, so that goes a long way.
Yeah, now last question, question 3. Is it still realistic to see Temple in a bowl game this season?
You know, this is a tough question. We need 4 more wins with 8 games left in the season. I don't think it's impossible, but I don't know how likely it is. Temple has some pretty tough matchups such as Navy and Memphis. We also have new teams thrown into the mix in the AAC. such as UAB and North Texas, that we don't quite know how Temple's going to match up against?
I think we need to slow down a little bit. We can't be prisoners of the moment. I mean, Temple just played an 20th ranked Miami team. We knew they'd dominate that game. They knew they'd be a loss. They're at 2-2, exactly where I thought they'd be so far. 5 out of the remaining 8 games so far I think are winnable, including this Tulsa game. Even though I didn't predict them to win, I think they could walk out with a win in this one. They only have 3 games that I see that are really going to be tough for them this season, for the rest of the season. UTSA, SMU, and Memphis. The other 5 games, I think they have a legit shot.
I agree with you, Jake. It's now time for our final break of the day. When we come back, Inside the Nest beat reporter Sam Covone will join us at the desk to talk about all things AAC.
Stick around. Inside the Nest will be right back.
Welcome back. We've covered just about every aspect of Temple football today, so it's time to bring back Inside the Nest beat reporter Sam Covone, who is at the studio set to fill us in on the rest of the AAC.
Hey Sam, for the most part, week 4 was still non-conference games.
Yes, guys, this week there are no longer any undefeated teams left in the AAC. Memphis came up just 7 points shy of defeating nationally ranked Missouri. On the flip side, North Texas got its first win of the season against Louisiana Tech, beating them 40-37. East Carolina also got its first win of the season in a shutout that no one expected. ECU scored 44 points against Gardner-Webb. This is the Pirates' first shutout in 23 years. This week was full of blowouts as Tulane beat Nicholls State 36-7. Nicholls State threw 4 interceptions and struggled with its run game, only getting 62 rushing yards. The South Florida Bulls handed the Rice Owls their first AAC loss in the only conference game of the weekend. The Bulls had almost 600 total yards, helping them steal the victory 42-29. And speaking of that South Florida versus Rice game, in a stat check, there was a 60% chance that Rice would walk out of the game with the win by at least 3 points.
Hey Sam, welcome to the desk. All right, keep talking. Tell us more about your stand-up game of the week.
Okay, so this was a very close game where South Florida actually trailed Rice until the 3rd quarter. With 2 minutes left, they scored a 49-yard touchdown, and it was all South Florida from that point on. Already leading 27-20, the Bulls went into the 4th quarter and scored 2 more touchdowns within the 4 minutes of each other. A 2-point conversion brought the score to 42-21, and in a last-ditch effort, the Owls scored a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. But it was not enough before the clock ran out. The end score of this game being 42-29, and the South Florida Bulls taking home their first conference victory of the season.
Now we're going into week 5, so for the first 4 weeks, what team has surprised you most in the AAC?
So I've been pleasantly surprised with how South Florida was playing. Like I just mentioned, in the standout game, they just got their first conference win, moving them to 1-0 in conference. Last year, this team didn't even get a single conference win. Their overall record also stands at 2-2, which is another improvement from last year when they were 1-11. Now, this is a team that might not compete for a league title, but it very well could be the most improved team in the AAC this season.
Well, thank you, Sam, but that is all the time we have for today. Make sure to follow us on socials at Owl Sports Update.
For our entire crew, thanks for tuning in with us, and we will see you the same time next week.